Prologue. Molly Gray, a maid who works in a hotel, silently cleaning up after guests and observing the details they leave behind. Molly Gray empties trash, changes sheets, straightens shoes, and erases all traces of what happened in the room. She sees evidence of secrets, from receipts discarded in shame to stray hairs on pillows that don't belong to the guest. Molly Gray is the invisible observer, knowing the intimate, hidden lives of those who stay, yet remaining unnoticed herself. Despite how much Molly Gray sees and knows, the guests remain oblivious to her existence, never questioning who she is or what she might do with all the information she gathers. The passage ends with a chilling question. What do they really know about Molly Gray? This sets the tone for a story where Molly Gray's perception of truth, secrets, and power may not be as simple as it seems. In Chapter 2, Molly Gray remains in Mr. Snow's office, anxious about falling behind on her cleaning duties and missing tips. To calm herself, she mentally retraces her day leading up to finding Mr. Black dead. Her morning began as usual, entering through the grand lobby and greeting Mr. Preston, the hotel doorman. She prepared her maid's trolley, frustrated that Cheryl Green, her lazy supervisor, had left it unstocked. She visited Juan Manuel, a dishwasher she secretly helps by providing vacant room keycards. She then went to the social bar and grill where Rodney Stiles, the bartender, showed her a newspaper article about Mr. Black's legal battle with his daughter Victoria. Later, Molly Gray cleaned suite 401, where she found Giselle Black visibly upset, crying in the bathroom. Molly Gray noticed an open safe containing money and documents, as well as a flight itinerary for 2 to the Cayman Islands. Hours later, she would return to find Mr. Black dead in his bed. In Chapter 3, Molly Gray remains in Mr. Snow's office, growing anxious about the time passing. Eventually, Mr. Snow returns with Detective Stark, a stern, imposing officer who immediately unsettles Molly Gray with her piercing gaze. Detective Stark introduces herself and explains that she needs Molly Gray's witness statement since she was the first to find Mr. Black's body. Molly Gray remains polite and meticulous, carefully placing her cold teacup on a coaster before greeting the detective with a curtsy. When Mr. Snow mentions the seriousness of the situation, Molly Gray unintentionally smiles, recalling a joke about foul play, which is quickly misinterpreted. Detective Stark suggests taking Molly Gray to the station. Initially hesitant due to her unfinished shift, Molly Gray agrees after Mr. Snow assures her that she will be paid in full. Detective Stark then leads Molly Gray out of the Regency Grand Hotel through the service entrance. In Chapter 4, Molly Gray is taken to the police station, where she waits in a small, unclean interrogation room. Detective Stark brings her water and assures her she isn't in trouble, but needs to provide a witness statement. During questioning, Molly Gray carefully answers, revealing only what she chooses. She confirms that Mr. Black was in his usual state of disarray, but mentions the pills on the bedside table, which she identifies as Giselle Black's. She avoids discussing the open safe, missing money, flight itinerary, and what she saw in the mirror. When asked about her relationship with Giselle Black, Molly Gray recalls their growing friendship, Giselle's dissatisfaction with her marriage, and how she confided in Molly Gray about Mr. Black's infidelity and controlling behavior. However, when pressed, Molly Gray denies having significant conversations with Giselle Black. Satisfied, Detective Stark ends the questioning and drives Molly Gray home. In Chapter 5, Molly Gray returns to her apartment, continuing her strict cleaning routine while reminiscing about Gran, who passed away 9 months ago. She reflects on their structured life together, their shared love of Colombo, and the values Gran instilled in her about cleanliness and order. Her thoughts drift to the past, her difficult school years, how Gran encouraged her to aim higher, and her eventual job at the Regency Grand. She recalls Wilbur Brown, a manipulative ex-boyfriend who stole all the savings from their Fabergé account, leaving her struggling financially. Gran's declining health, revealed as pancreatic cancer, forced Molly to take on more work to cover medical expenses and rent. Before passing, Gran made Molly promise to keep her at home rather than in a hospital. Molly's memories are interrupted by a call from Mr. Snow, asking her to cover Cheryl's shift due to her trauma over Mr. Black's death. Molly agrees without hesitation. Tuesday. In Chapter 6, Molly wakes from a nightmare about Mr. Black, unsettled but determined to start her day. On her way to work, she encounters Mr. Rosso, who reminds her that her rent is overdue, but she reassures him she will pay soon. At the Regency Grand, Mr. Preston expresses concern for her well-being and she inquires whether Mr. Black had any visitors before his death. He saw none. Inside, Mr. Snow shows Molly a newspaper article suggesting foul play in Mr. Black's death and confirms that Giselle is still at the hotel, now staying on the second floor under discreet arrangements. Molly warns Juan Manuel to stay off the fourth floor due to the police investigation. At the bar, she notices Rodney's bruised eye. He invites her to meet after her shift to discuss the police questioning and what she saw. Molly eagerly accepts the invitation. In Chapter 7, Molly reflects on the stark contrast between the previous day's shock of finding Mr. Black dead and today's excitement, Rodney asking her on a date. She resumes her cleaning duties at the Regency Grand, avoiding the Black Suite, which remains under police investigation. A brief encounter with an officer irritates her, but she carries on with her work. As she cleans, she recalls a past incident where she unknowingly walked into a suspicious meeting involving Rodney, Juan Manuel, and two intimidating men. Rodney assured her everything was fine, subtly pressuring her to stay silent and clean up after them. That night, Molly eagerly meets Rodney for their date at Olive Garden. Over dinner, Rodney explains that he's been secretly helping Juan Manuel, who is undocumented, by letting him stay in empty hotel rooms. He asks Molly to assist him by providing room access and discreetly cleaning up. Flattered by his trust, Molly agrees, sealing their deal with a misaligned kiss. In Chapter 8, Molly reflects on her upcoming date with Rodney while trying to push away intrusive memories of Mr. Black's death. Her shift ends, and she anticipates the evening, avoiding thoughts of Giselle, who is still staying at the hotel. As she prepares, Molly notices Rodney's bruised eye and listens as he inquires about her interactions with the police, especially regarding Juan Manuel. She shares details about the Black Suite, including the open safe and Giselle's spilled pills, but avoids mentioning too much about Giselle's potential involvement. Rodney expresses concern for Giselle in the hotel, but Molly becomes suspicious of his interest in her. After a heartfelt conversation, Rodney shares his phone number with Molly and they exchange numbers. Later, Mr. Snow and Mr. Preston make brief appearances, with Preston warning Molly about Rodney, calling him a frog who might not be a prince. In Chapter 9, Molly, still thinking about her date with Rodney, arrives home to find Giselle waiting outside. Giselle is upset and shares that she's been questioned by the police about Mr. Black's death. She explains the strained relationship with Charles, including his prenup and their frequent arguments. Giselle reveals that during a fight, Charles stormed out after taking something from the safe, and she believes the police suspect her involvement in his death. Giselle asks Molly to retrieve a gun she left in the bathroom fan of the Black Suite, citing her need for protection after Charles's death. She leaves money for Molly as a tip, despite her not finishing the cleaning. Giselle also hints at her vulnerability, feeling exposed with Charles gone. Molly agrees to help, despite feeling anxious about the request. Giselle departs, leaving Molly with lingering concerns about her behavior and motives. Wednesday. In Chapter 10, Molly begins her day reflecting on memories of Gran, then focuses on her responsibilities, including paying part of her rent to Mr. Rosso. At work, she interacts with Mr. Preston and Cheryl before heading to the Black Suite to clean. She notes the disarray left by the police, with items missing including Giselle's pills and Mr. Black's personal effects. Molly cleans the suite thoroughly, finding Giselle's gun hidden in the bathroom fan. She reflects on Giselle's situation and feels empathy for her, deciding to hide the gun in the vacuum cleaner to keep it safe. While cleaning, Molly finds Mr. Black's wedding ring in the vacuum filter. She realizes the significance of the find and decides what to do next, feeling guided by Gran's spirit. This marks a turning point in Molly's actions as she contemplates her next move. In Chapter 11, Molly is continuing her work at the hotel, reflecting on her interactions with Cheryl, Sunitha, and Mr. Preston. Sunitha warns her to be cautious, hinting at hidden dangers in her surroundings. Molly heads out for a lunch errand, rushing past Cheryl, who comments on her unusual break. Molly spends time walking to a shop to sell Mr. Black's wedding ring, which she had found earlier, wrapped in a tissue. Molly, conflicted but resolute, arrives back at work with the money from the ring sale in her brassiere. She reflects on Mr. Black's abusive behavior and the harshness of her situation. Upon returning, she feels empowered, standing tall, determined to keep her integrity while dealing with the complexities of her life. Molly's inner conflict gives way to a renewed sense of control, acknowledging her actions as the necessity they were. In Chapter 12, Molly walks back to the hotel, noticing fewer guests and a tense atmosphere. Upon arriving, she is stopped by Mr. Preston, who urgently tells her to use the back door. When she ignores his warning and enters, she is confronted by Mr. Snow and Detective Stark, who inform her she is being taken for more questioning. Despite her attempts to continue her shift, Detective Stark insists on taking her to the station. Molly notices the growing crowd of guests watching her closely, their eyes filled with judgment. She reluctantly agrees to cooperate with the detective, leaving the hotel under the watchful gaze of everyone. Mr. Preston offers support as he helps her down the stairs, but Molly feels unsettled. As they leave, she realizes the situation is escalating, but she maintains her composure, though doubt lingers in her mind. In Chapter 13, Molly is taken to the police station for further questioning. Detective Stark confronts her with the toxicology report on Mr. Black, revealing drugs in his system, but not enough to cause death. The detective pushes Molly to reveal more about her relationship with Giselle, noting inconsistencies in her statements. Stark also mentions that Cheryl has shared information about Molly and Giselle's relationship, including tips Molly received from Giselle. When Stark presents Giselle's timer, found in Molly's locker, Molly defends her privacy but is increasingly uneasy. Stark suggests Molly is becoming a person of interest and warns her not to leave the country. Molly insists she has done nothing wrong, maintaining her innocence, while Stark hints at watching her closely. The chapter ends with Molly reflecting on the dirt that always surfaces, reinforcing her belief in the importance of truth. In Chapter 14, Molly returns home after intense questioning by Detective Stark, feeling overwhelmed by the burden of secrets she's keeping. She pays her rent to Mr. Rosso, who urges her to get her life in order. As Molly settles into her quiet home, she reflects on her past, including painful memories of her mother and grand's influence. After a moment of solitude, she decides to call Rodney for help. She confesses that she took Giselle's gun and hid it in her vacuum cleaner, and also admits to pawning Mr. Black's wedding ring to pay rent, fearing it will make her appear guilty. Rodney reassures her, promising to take care of everything. He instructs her not to go out, and Molly is left feeling both grateful and anxious, wondering about their future. She dreams of a time when they can enjoy a carefree meal together once everything settles. Thursday. In Chapter 15, Molly wakes up to find herself late for work, haunted by a nightmare involving various people in her life. She answers a knock on her door, expecting Mr. Rosso, but instead finds a group of police officers, including Detective Stark, who arrest her for the murder of Mr. Black and other charges. After being taken to a holding cell and interrogated, Molly is confronted with evidence, including traces of cocaine on her cleaning cart and the gun she hid in her vacuum cleaner. Detective Stark accuses her of being involved in a drug operation with Mr. Black and possibly killing him. Molly denies the charges and demands a lawyer, leading her to call Mr. Preston, seeking help. As she waits, she's unsure who to trust, realizing she needs support to navigate the escalating accusations. In Chapter 16, after Molly's call to Mr. Preston, Detective Stark informs her that she's under arrest for the murder of Mr. Black and related charges. Molly is in shock, but she remains mostly silent, knowing her right to an attorney. Mr. Preston and his daughter Charlotte, a lawyer, arrive, offering legal representation and assuring her they'll get her out on bail. Detective Stark mocks the idea of Molly affording bail, but Charlotte smoothly arranges for it, using her father's character statement and her own pledge to post the bail. Charlotte also ensures that Molly's personal items, like her phone and keys, are not logged as evidence. Molly is informed that even if she's released, the charges will still stand and a trial is inevitable. As Molly is escorted back to the holding cell, she thanks Detective Stark for the muffin and coffee, maintaining her composure. In Chapter 17, Molly is nervously awaiting her bail hearing, dressed in pajamas, feeling out of place in a courtroom. Her young attorney, unprepared and distracted, asks her a series of questions before the hearing begins. As they enter the courtroom, Detective Stark presents charges against Molly, casting doubt on her character and suggesting she's involved in illegal activities with Mr. Black. Molly's attorney argues that she poses no flight risk and has a clean record. The judge questions the seriousness of the charges and mentions Molly's connection to Charlotte Preston, who has arranged for her bail. After some back and forth, the judge grants Molly conditional bail, with restrictions on her movement. Despite her inappropriate attire, Molly's respect for rules and her humble demeanor seem to sway the judge, leading to her release. In Chapter 18, Molly, newly released on bail, is driven home by Mr. Preston and his daughter Charlotte. Over tea at her apartment, she recounts details about the day Mr. Black was found dead including Giselle's distress, the hidden gun, and the ring she pawned. Charlotte and Mr. Preston gradually piece together a more sinister narrative. Rodney may have manipulated Molly and involved her unknowingly in illegal activities. Molly also reveals how Juan Manuel, a dishwasher at the hotel, has been secretly living in unused hotel rooms and may be coerced into handling drugs. As the full scope of the situation becomes clear, Molly is overwhelmed with the realization that she's been exploited by those she trusted, effectively used as an unwitting accomplice. In Chapter 19, Molly, Mr. Preston, and Charlotte await Juan Manuel's arrival, hoping he will provide crucial information to clear Molly's name. After contacting Juan Manuel, Mr. Preston reassures him that they are on his side and that he now has a choice between their help and remaining under the control of Rodney, who coerced him into criminal activities. Juan Manuel arrives visibly distressed and shares his story, revealing that Rodney forced him into a drug operation, threatening his family and physically abusing him. Juan Manuel also provides proof of Rodney's connection to Giselle, showing a photo of them kissing, which deepens the mystery. Charlotte and Mr. Preston believe that Giselle and Rodney may have wanted Mr. Black dead, but they need irrefutable proof. Mr. Preston proposes a plan to outsmart the perpetrators and prove Molly's innocence, emphasizing teamwork. In Chapter 20, Molly and her team, Mr. Preston, Charlotte, and Juan Manuel, prepare for a risky plan to trap Rodney. They rehearse various scenarios and refine their approach, with Molly playing different roles to practice deception. After much preparation, they agree on the text Molly will send to Rodney, a carefully crafted message that implies she has revealed critical information to the police about Mr. Black's murder. Rodney responds quickly, agreeing to meet at the Olive Garden. They refine Molly's reply to make it sound more like her, using polite and respectful language. With everyone's confidence behind her, Molly feels a mix of nerves and determination. Though she has doubts, she sets off to meet Rodney, ready to execute the plan that will hopefully expose him and clear her name. The chapter ends with her walking out the door, supported by her team but still uncertain. In Chapter 21, Molly nervously waits at the Olive Garden for Rodney, reflecting on her tense situation. When he arrives, they engage in a practiced conversation where Molly carefully presents details about Mr. Black's murder, subtly feeding Rodney information to see his reaction. She hints at Giselle's lack of inheritance, the gun in her vacuum, and the fact that Cheryl alerted the police. As they discuss, Molly starts to manipulate Rodney, mentioning Juan Manuel's involvement. Rodney is visibly uncomfortable, but he insists on making sure Juan Manuel doesn't get caught. Molly pretends to agree to help him clean the Black Suite, arranging to secretly hand over the key to Rodney so he can clean up the evidence before the police arrive. After their conversation, Rodney rushes off and Molly leaves the restaurant, reflecting on her cleverness and the trap she set, despite Rodney's apparent disdain. In Chapter 22, Molly returns home and updates Mr. Preston, Charlotte, and Juan Manuel about her meeting with Rodney, revealing that he's heading back to the hotel to clean up the suite. They discuss their plan and Juan Manuel's uncertain future, as he's afraid of returning to work at the hotel. Molly offers him her room for the night, demonstrating her kindness despite the awkwardness. While they enjoy takeout, a news broadcast announces an upcoming press conference revealing new details about Mr. Black's murder. Molly worries about her name being mentioned before Rodney gets to the hotel. Mr. Preston prepares to leave early for work, and the group solidifies their next steps. Molly, though nervous, is ready for the plan to unfold, knowing time is running out. The tension rises as they prepare for the final phase of their scheme to catch Rodney. In Chapter 23, Molly, feeling nervous and uncertain, walks to the hotel and waits in an alley, observing the surroundings and the arrival of Mr. Preston and Rodney. She carries out her part in the plan, texting Rodney about being locked out, which leads to a conversation where Rodney seems unaware of her arrest. She contacts Juan Manuel to decode Rodney's cryptic text, discovering it means, "be right there." As Rodney arrives, Molly continues her performance, making a scene at the hotel entrance with Mr. Snow to divert attention. Eventually, Mr. Preston discreetly hands Molly the master key card to the Black Suite after securing it from Cheryl. Molly passes the key to Rodney, who rushes inside. She plays along with the situation, maintaining her role and keeping up the ruse, while Rodney goes inside to clean the room. The plan is in motion, and Molly checks her phone. It's time. In Chapter 24, Molly waits nervously at a coffee shop across from the hotel, observing the events unfolding as part of her plan. She watches Mr. Preston, who communicates the success of their plan and receives confirmation from Charlotte via text. The news reports Molly's arrest for Mr. Black's murder, and she feels a sense of helplessness as she watches police activity at the hotel. Molly makes a crucial phone call to Giselle, confronting her about the involvement with Rodney and Mr. Black. Giselle denies any role in the murder, explaining that Rodney framed Molly and that she was unaware of the full extent of his actions. Molly urges Giselle to leave the hotel and go to the Cayman Islands for her safety. As Molly continues to observe the hotel, Rodney is arrested, and Detective Stark acknowledges Molly with a subtle nod, signaling the completion of the plan. In Chapter 25, Molly returns home, feeling a sense of hope for the first time since Grand's death. She shares a meal with Juan Manuel, who expresses relief over Rodney's arrest and apologizes for not protecting her sooner. They bond over their shared experiences, and Juan Manuel's emotional vulnerability helps Molly feel less alone. After a phone call with Charlotte confirming Rodney's capture, the mood shifts as Molly reflects on the challenges she faced. Detective Stark arrives with good news. All charges against Molly are dropped, and Rodney is charged with murder. The detective seeks further help from Molly and Juan Manuel to investigate Rodney's criminal activities. Juan Manuel agrees to assist, and Molly finds herself surrounded by friends who care deeply for her. The chapter concludes with Molly remembering Gran and the promise she made to her, reflecting on the bittersweet nature of life and loss. Friday. In Chapter 26, Molly wakes up in Gran's bed and is greeted by Juan Manuel making breakfast. They share a meal together, with Juan Manuel talking about his family and missing them. Molly answers a call from Mr. Snow, who apologizes for believing the accusations against her and offers her job back at the hotel. He also extends an offer for Juan Manuel to return, reassuring him that his work permit issues are resolvable. Molly feels validated and proud of Mr. Snow's praise. Juan Manuel is also relieved to learn he still has a job, and they both enjoy the morning together. They discuss their day off and the possibility of doing something fun. The chapter ends with Molly asking Juan Manuel if he likes ice cream, signaling a shift toward a more hopeful future for both of them. Several months later. In Chapter 27, Molly arrives at the Regency Grand feeling positive and reflective. She's greeted by Mr. Preston and heads to work, noticing the staff's respectful behavior toward her after her testimony. Mr. Snow praises Molly for her courtroom performance and offers her a promotion, which leads to improvements in housekeeping. Molly also supports her new maid Ricky and works to improve team morale. She's planning to use her raise to fund her education in hotel management. Juan Manuel, now officially her partner, also has his work permit and job reinstated. Their relationship grows stronger, and they enjoy life together. During the trial, Molly shares her experience of seeing a shadowy figure in the hotel room with Mr. Black's body, which raises doubts in the court. Ultimately, Molly's truthful testimony helps convict Rodney. Afterward, Molly receives a surprising gift of $10,000 from Giselle, who has started a new life in the Cayman Islands. Epilogue. Molly reflects on her life's lessons, learning that truth is subjective and shaped by personal experience. She understands now that truth and justice are not absolute, but are influenced by perspective. Molly recounts the day she found Mr. Black's body, recalling seeing a shadowy figure in the room. She later learns the figure was Mrs. Black, the first wife, who confesses to having a complicated relationship with her ex-husband, Mr. Black. She explains her actions, revealing her ex-husband's abusive nature and the family's dysfunction. Molly and Mrs. Black both share a sense of invisibility, and the conversation leaves Molly with the understanding that sometimes good people must act in morally gray ways. Afterward, Molly continues her life with Juan Manuel, feeling more grounded and at peace, finding strength in her ability to clean and care, as well as in the power of her own heart and mind.